This is Torah 411, and today's study is going to be about when a day begins. A lot of people in the Messianic or Torah movement believe that a day starts at sunset and goes sunset to sunset. This, however, is a false belief. It does not come from God. It is not biblical. And from my research, it appears to be Babylonian. Let's begin the study and see what Scripture has to say.
The best place to start is at the start. So, what does the creation in Genesis reveal? Genesis chapter 1, verses 1 to 5. In the beginning, Elohim created the Shamayim and the earth. And the earth came to be, formless and empty, and darkness was on the face of the deep. And the Ruach of Elohim was moving on the face of the waters. And Elohim said, "Let light come to be." And light came to be. And Elohim saw the light, that it was good. And Elohim separated the light from the darkness, and Elohim called the light day, that's Hebrew Yom, and the darkness he called night. And there came to be evening, and there came to be morning, day one. Please note, the light was not the sunlight for the first 3 days. This is a picture of Yeshua, the Messiah, in the earth. John 12:46 reveals, "I am come as a light into the world." We know that light, or Yeshua, was the first creation. For in Colossians 1, verse 15 to 17, it records, "Who is the likeness of the invisible Elohim, the firstborn of all creation, because in him were created all that are in the Shamayim and that are on the earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or rulerships, or principalities or authorities. All have been created through him and for him, and he is before all, and in him all hold together." Note, in Hebrew, the word light is or yom. Darkness is night, which in Hebrew is laila. Evening, erev, morning, boker, first, echad. Hebrew is cyclical rather than linear thinking. Erev means a mixing or a blending. You can't have it without both light and darkness, which means the light must have been there prior to the darkness. Morning, which is boker in Hebrew, is a breaking, a dividing, a separation, or delineation or demarcation. All was stated as happening in order. Then boker occurs, and that was the echad, or unified day. This is not the word rishon for first. Therefore, the translation day one is more accurate than the first day. So, to simplify all the above, the daylight part of a 24-hour period is called day, in Hebrew yom. Evening is erev, the mixing of the light and darkness after sunset. Morning is boker, the break of the day, which is the sun breaking the horizon. Note that it is true that Yom can mean an undefined period of time unless it is defined, as it is in the Genesis account. There came to be evening, and there came to be morning. This account of day one is no different than describing the age of a child. You are not truly 1 year old till you have lived a whole year. Genesis describes the events that take place during the daylight period, then night comes, then morning, and is called the first day. The 6-day creation defines for us when a day starts. In the beginning, there is nothingness or darkness. Then Elohim creates light and calls it day, Yom. That is the start. The scriptures state that evening came, then morning, or the start of the next day. That was the first day. The creation process continues like this for 6 days. Daylight period, or Yom, is the creation period, then evening, then morning. It's really that simple. A day is morning to morning. At the end of the 6 days of creation, we read Genesis chapter 2, verse 1 to 3. Thus the Shamayim and the earth were completed, and all their array. And on the 7th day, Yom, Elohim completed his work which he had done, and rested on the 7th day, Yom, from all his work which he had made. And Elohim baruch the seventh day, Yom, and kadosh it, because on it he rested from all his work which Elohim in creating had made. So to clarify when a day starts, Scripture informs that Elohim rested and blessed the seventh daylight period, not the sixth night. Please note that it is not saying that a day is 12 hours. A full day, according to the creation account, is defined as 24 hours starting in the morning. If you believe that the statement, there came to be evening and there came to be morning, the first day, supports a day beginning the evening, then you must believe that a day is only 12 hours, for evening to morning is only 12 hours. But as we see from Scripture, this is not the case. As we continue through Scripture, we find many narratives that define a 24-hour day beginning in the morning. The following are some of the most straightforward. Genesis chapter 1 verse 16. And Elohim made two great lights, the greater light to rule the day, and the lesser light to rule the night and the stars. Please note, why would Yahweh start a day with a lesser light? Genesis chapter 1 verse 18. And to rule over the day and over the night, and to separate the light from the darkness. Note the order: day, night, light, darkness. Genesis chapter 19 verse 33 to 34. So they made their father drink wine that night, and the firstborn went in and lay with her father. And he was not aware of it when she lay down, or when she arose. And it came to be on the next day that the firstborn said to the younger, See, I lay with my father last night. Note, the next day followed the night. Exodus chapter 10 verse 13. And Moshe stretched out his rod over the land of Mitzrayim, and Yahweh brought an east wind on the land all that day and all that night. Morning came, and the east wind brought the locusts. Note that that day belongs to that night, then the morning came. Exodus chapter 16 verse 22 to 27. And it came to be on the sixth day that they gathered twice as much bread, 2 omers for each one. And all the rulers of the congregation came and told Moshe, and he said to them, This is what Yahweh has said. Tomorrow is a rest, a Sabbath, kadosh to Yahweh. That which you bake, bake, and that which you cook, cook, and lay up for yourselves all that is left over to keep until morning. And they laid it up till morning, as Moshe commanded, and it did not stink, and no worm was in it. And Moshe said, Eat it today, for today is a Shabbat to Yahweh. Today you do not find it in the field. Gather it 6 days, but on the seventh day, which is the Shabbat, there is none. And it came to be that some of the people went out on the seventh day to gather, but they found none. Note that Yahweh said, Tomorrow was Shabbat. Then morning comes, and Moshe said, Eat it today, for today is a Shabbat. Exodus chapter 18 verse 13. And it came to be on the next day that Moshe sat to rightly rule the people, and the people stood before Moshe from morning until evening. Note that the next day starts in the morning. Exodus chapter 32 verse 5 and 6. And Aaron saw and built an altar before it, and Aaron called out and said, Tomorrow is a festival to Yahweh. And they rose early on the next day, and offered burnt offerings and brought peace offerings, and the people sat down to eat and drink, and rose up to play. Note that Aaron said tomorrow is a festival, and the next day they rose early. You don't rise at night. Leviticus chapter 6 verse 20. This is the offering of Aaron and his sons, which they bring near to Yahweh beginning on the day when he is anointed. 1/10 of an ephah of fine flour as a daily grain offering, half of it in the morning, and half of it at night. Note that the offering was to be brought to Yahweh in the morning, the beginning of the day. Leviticus chapter 7 verse 15. As for the flesh of the slaughtering of his peace offering for thanksgiving, it is eaten the same day it is offered. He does not leave any of it until morning. Here's the question. How can you eat your peace offering the same day and not leave any of it until morning if your day starts at night? Numbers chapter 11 verse 32. And the people were up all that day and all that night and all the next day and gathered the quail He who had least gathered 10 omers, and they spread them out for themselves all around the camp. Note again that that day belongs to that night, then the next day comes. Joshua chapter 7, verse 6 to 13. And Joshua tore his garments and fell to the earth on his face before the ark of Yahweh until evening, both he and the elders of Israel, and they put dust on their heads. And Yahweh said to Joshua, Rise up, why are you lying on your face? Rise up, kadosh the people, and you shall say, Kadosh yourselves for tomorrow, because thus said Yahweh Elohim of Israel, that which is under the ban is in your midst. Note that it was already evening when Yahweh told Joshua to kadosh themselves for tomorrow, so the day cannot begin in the evening. Judges chapter 19, verse 9. And the man arose to go, he and his concubine and his servant. But his father-in-law, the young woman's father, said to him, See, the day is now drawing toward evening. Please spend the night. See, the day is coming to an end. Stay here and let your heart be glad, and you shall rise early tomorrow for your journey, and you shall go to your tent. Note, rising early tomorrow implies the start of the day being morning. You will never see the words in Scripture, early at night. Samuel chapter 9, verse 19 to 26. And Shemuel answered Shaul and said, I am the seer. Go up before me to the high place, for you shall eat with me today. And tomorrow I shall let you go, and make known to you all that is in your heart. And they rose early, and it came to be about the dawning of the day that Shemuel called to Shaul on the roof, saying, Rise, so that I send you on your way. Note that rising early at the dawning of the day again equates the start of the day being in the morning. 1 Samuel chapter 19, verse 10 to 11. And Shaul sought to smite the spear through David and into the wall, but he slipped away from the presence of Shaul, so he smote the spear into the wall. And David fled and escaped that night. And Shaul sent messengers to David's house to watch him, and to put him to death in the morning. And Michal, David's wife, informed him, saying, If you do not save your life tonight, tomorrow you are put to death. Note that it was already night when Michal told David to flee in the morning, for tomorrow he was to be killed, so a day cannot begin at evening. 1 Samuel chapter 28, verse 8 to 19. And Shaul disguised himself, and put on other garments, and went, he and 2 men with him. And they came to the woman by night. And he said, Please divine for me, and bring up for me the one I shall name. So he said, Bring up Shemuel for me. Then Shemuel said, Why do you ask me, seeing Yahweh has turned aside from you, and has become your enemy? Further, Yahweh also gives Israel with you into the hand of the Pelishites. And tomorrow you and your sons are with me. Yahweh also gives the army of Israel into the hand of the Pelishites. Note that if Shaul came at night, and they were to fight with the Philistines tomorrow, how could the day begin at night? 1 Samuel chapter 30, verse 17. And David smote them from twilight until evening of the next day, and none of them escaped, except 400 young men who rode on camels and fled. Note that if a day were from evening to evening, the Scriptures would not have to read the next day. 2 Samuel chapter 24, verse 13 to 15. Gad then came to David and informed him, and he said to him, Should 7 years of scarcity of food come to you in your land? Or would you flee 3 months before your enemies, while they pursue you? Or should there be 3 days plague in your land? Now know and see what answer I take back to him who sent me. And David said to Gad, I am in great trouble. Please let us fall into the hand of Yahweh, for his compassion is great, but do not let me fall into the hand of a man. And Yahweh sent a plague upon Israel from the morning till the appointed time, and from Dan to Beersheba 70,000 men of the people died. Note that the 3-day plague started in the morning, not at night. Lamentations chapter 3, verse 22. The kindnesses of Yahweh, for we have not been consumed, for his compassions have not ended. They are new every morning. Great is your trustworthiness. Note that new every morning, because morning is a new day. Jonah chapter 4, verse 6 and 7. And Yahweh Elohim appointed a plant and made it come up over Jonah to be a shade for his head to deliver him from his discomfort. And Jonah greatly rejoiced over the plant. But as morning dawned the next day, Elohim appointed a worm that attacked the plant so that it withered. Note that a morning starts the next day. Zechariah chapter 14 verse 7. And it shall be one day which is known to Yahweh, neither day nor night, but at evening time there shall be light. Note a 24-hour day is mentioned here, with the day preceding the night. Acts chapter 4 verse 3. And they arrested them and put them in jail until the next day, for it was already evening. Note again, it was dark, then the next day. Acts chapter 16 verse 9 to 11. And in the night a vision appeared to Shaul. A man of Macedonia was standing, begging him and saying, Come over to Macedonia and help us. And when he saw the vision, immediately we sought to go to Macedonia, concluding that the Master had called us to bring the good news to them. Therefore, sailing from Troas, we ran a straight course from Samothrace, and the next day came to Neapolis. Note that the next day follows the night yet again. Acts chapter 23 verse 31 and 32. So the soldiers, as they were commanded, took Shaul and brought him by night to Antipatris. And on the next day they left the horsemen to go on with him and returned to the barracks. Again, the next day follows the night. On top of all these scriptural accounts, having the night as the first part of the day seems to be a reversal of many of Yeshua's parables, which he described himself to us as the light of the world, John 8:12, John 9:5, John 12:46, etc. We should walk in the light and not in darkness, John 8:12, John 11:9-10, John 12:35, John 9 verse 4, etc. With so many scriptural references defining the day and when it begins, one wonders what compels some to hold the traditions of the evening-to-evening Shabbat. To be fair, there are a couple of references that can cause confusion if taken out of context. Leviticus chapter 23 verse 26 and 32. And Yahweh spoke to Moshe, saying, On the 10th day of the 7th month is the day of atonement. It shall be a Kodesh gathering for you, and you shall afflict your beings, and shall bring an offering made by fire to Yahweh. And you do no work on that same day, for it is a day of atonement, to make atonement for you before Yahweh Elohim. For any being who is not afflicted on that same day, he shall be cut off from his people. And any being who does any work on that same day, that being I shall destroy from the midst of his people. You do no work, a law forever throughout your generations and all your dwellings. It is a Shabbat of rest to you, and you shall afflict your beings. On the 9th day of the month at evening, from evening to evening, you observe your Shabbat. It is quite clear in the context of this law that the Sabbath for the Day of Atonement differs from other Sabbaths, in that Yahweh specified this particular high Sabbath to be kept from evening to evening. Notice that Yahweh makes it clear by numbering the days that the Day of Atonement is on the 10th day, but the fast commences on the 9th day at evening. Why would Yahweh command us to start the fast on the 9th day at evening if the 10th day started at the evening anyhow? Another exception is the night of the Passover in which Yahweh led his people out of Egypt. Leviticus chapter 23 verse 5. In the first month, on the 14th day of the month, between the evenings, is the Pesach to Yahweh. One glaring problem of the evening-to-evening observance is that it is impossible to celebrate your Passover on the evening of the 14th and eat your celebration meal that night. If your day starts in the evening, then celebrate it at night, then you have passed into the 15th according to an evening-to-evening reckoning. Exodus 12 verse 6 reads, And you shall keep it until the 14th day of the same month. Then all the assembly of the congregation of Israel shall kill it between the evenings, and they shall take some of the blood and put it on the 2 doorposts and on the lintel of the houses where they eat it, and they shall eat the flesh on that night, roasted in fire with unleavened bread, and with bitter herbs they shall eat it. Note, this whole festival takes place on the one day of the 14th, starting between the evenings and continuing that night. Some express difficulty in correlating the morning-to-morning reckoning with the Passover, yet the timing of this important festival is not defining when a day starts or ends. Yahweh simply wants us to honor the feast on that night of the 14th because that is the time he led his people out of Mitzrayim. Deuteronomy 16:1. Guard the month of Aviv and perform the Pesach to Yahweh your Elohim, for in the month of Aviv Yahweh your Elohim brought you out of Mitzrayim by night. Deuteronomy 16:6. You slaughter the Pesach in the evening, at the going down of the sun, at the appointed time you came out of Mitzrayim. The Feast of Unleavened Bread follows on from the Passover, and we are also commanded to remove leaven from our homes that night. Exodus chapter 12 verse 18. In the first month, on the 14th day of the month, in the evening, you shall eat unleavened bread until the 21st day of the month in the evening. Something to take into account. If someone keeps Passover at the beginning of the 14th, the end of the 13th, they sit with 8 days of unleavened bread, where the command is clear to eat unleavened bread from the eating of the Pesach for 7 days. Exodus 12:15, verse 19, 13 verse 6 and 7, 23 verse 15, 34 verse 18, Leviticus 23 verse 6, Numbers 28 verse 17. Most importantly, Deuteronomy 16 verse 2 to 3. You shall slaughter the Pesach to Yahweh your Elohim from the flock and the herd in the place where Yahweh chooses to put his name. Eat no leavened bread with it. For 7 days you eat unleavened bread with it, bread of affliction. Note that this suggests that Passover is the start of the 7-day unleavened bread period, which is a continuous 7-day period and not an 8-day period. The festival of unleavened bread simply cannot begin at sundown after the Passover, as Scripture commands the leftovers to be burnt before morning.
All right, and with all my studies, I study the Word several times over and over, and I post what I believe the context is, and what I believe Scripture is saying. So I'm not going to entertain any arguments in the comments or anything. This is my study. It's to inspire you to do your own research and your own study. This is Torah 411.